And welcome to the Midday Show. I am Jeff Everett. He is Mark Messina. He is ready to roll. He's ready to go. I can tell. I can just tell. I think we're going to have a very spirited debate today. Is that a fair way of putting it? We're going to talk about Alec Baldwin and the manslaughter charges against him and the armorer on the movie set of Rust. We're also going to eventually dive into football playoffs. The producers of the Midday Show, who I have now informed you about, they have questions about seasonal foods, eating seasonal foods out of season.
I have no response.
And you walked in today. We dove into a little bit of the Alec Baldwin. I will say this, in 3 years, you were, usually when we have these, you are not as excitable as you were when we first started talking about the Alec Baldwin incident.
Well, before we get to that, I have a very special announcement.
Okay.
A public service announcement.
Go ahead.
Tomorrow, we're here at North Central PA. We're very close with the CTL and the Community Theater League of Williamsport. And they do this special program every winter. I guess it's probably after, it's in January, February every year. It's called Evening with a Star, and they bring in a star. And it's a fundraiser, but it's an aspect for anyone who loves theater, is interested in theater, whatever, and they can come, and it's like a workshop speaking thing, and they can learn from a pro. And it is tomorrow. Yeah, it's tomorrow, 7:30. And they have like in the teens tickets left. So I think there's only, how many seats are there? 150. It's a you've been to the CTL. It's a, what word am I looking for? Cozy.
It's cozy.
It's not this big cavernous place, like personal. Yeah, it is a very personal setting, so it's a good production. And if you know anyone that would be interested, or you have a kid that you think is interested in theater and all this stuff, so it's Gavin Creel. He has won a Tony Award. Okay. So for those of you who don't know, that means he doesn't suck.
Yes.
They don't give Tony Awards to.
He didn't almost, and he didn't seem to be.
Yes, he won.
He won.
He's been in like Hello Dolly, The Book of Mormon, Waitress, Into the Woods, on TVs on American Horror Story. Eloise at the Plaza. Do you know what that is?
I don't.
I've never heard of that one. So I thought maybe you did, and I'm just old. But I've heard of all the other ones. So Gavin Creel tomorrow night. So go to the website is ctlshows.com. Or I can never remember that, so I always just Google CTL Williamsport or Community Theater League Williamsport, and it will get there. But there are some tickets. They're just like something in the teens, 15, 16, 13, 18, something like that. So get on it.
Yeah, nice job.
There you go.
175. There are 25 seats left. So there you go.
She's wrong. There's not 175.
And then it's
hold on. Let me count real quick.
It's a children's movie based off of a book, in case you were wondering. 6, 7. You don't know. You're so full of it. You're so full of it.
What was it? Eloise at the Plaza is based on? I've heard all it. Book of Mormon. I've never seen Book of Mormon. I think I would enjoy that.
You would enjoy that. You would enjoy it. You're tough though. It's weird what you enjoy and what you don't, and you're finicky. Finicky is a good way to describe you.
I see. I think I'm kind of simple, but anyway, be that as it may. I did not know, and I think I told. What's the one with the stupid title? Bye Bye Birdie. I did not know Bye Bye Birdie was about 50s rock and roll until like a year ago.
Really?
I mean, Bye Bye Birdie is the dumbest title in the history of ever. And then it's about rock and roll? Yeah. Like, really? I'm picturing like old ladies in the park.
So you've never seen Bye Bye?
Never seen it. Now I would. Yeah. Now I'm interested.
Yeah, you probably need to.
Before that, no. I'm not sitting with the Golden Girls as we're looking for parakeets.
But you're very you're very cover-esque in the sense of like you will make decisions based off of like pinpoint like you read a book by its cover.
I am that talented that I can judge a book by its cover.
Yes, you.
Most people can't.
Talent is a way to put it.
But
yes, you successfully do it without a doubt.
All right.
Alec Baldwin, armor, will be charged with involuntary manslaughter after fatal shooting on the set of Rust. Most people know the details here. Rust was going to be a authentic Western. I don't know the exact time period, but an authentic Western, your typical cowboys, robbers, sheriffs, all of those things.
I like the title too for it.
Rust is good.
Rust is good.
Rust is good. it'll be interesting here. I mean, this is already kicking us off. Treat every gun like it's loaded, like Famous or Not. Oh, I didn't see the that was a producer mistake right there. But treat every gun like it's loaded, whether you're famous or not. This is going to be heated. You and I,
Right.
I think it's fair to say that you and I have portions of this we disagree with, but there's parts of it that you and I do agree with. I think it's that meet in the middle where it's going to be an interesting conversation between the two of us.
Well, here's my
Go
whole
ahead.
thing. He's just not in. He lives in a world that is of make believe, and for all of the rest of us who are never in that world. Yes, if you're in someone's garage, if you're in someone's barn, if you're in someone's, of course, every gun you would handle, unless you can tell that it's plastic and it came from Toys R Us and it's got a, I get it. But every real gun, of course, you would never act like it's loaded. But he is in a world of make believe. It could have been a lightsaber. There could be spaceships. He's pretending he's a sheriff from 150 years ago and all this. There's when you are in a garage and you pick up a gun. It could be loaded because why wouldn't there be live ammo? If you're on a farm, if you're in someone's house, if you're in wherever, of course there could be live ammo. You're on a film set why would there ever be live ammo? To me, it's almost like going through a museum and you see a gun and they say, this gun was used by Billy the Kid. And you're like, oh my gosh. And if it was used by Billy the Kid, once upon a time it fired. But if I'm in a museum, is it realistic for me to assume that it's empty? Of course, there shouldn't be live ammunition in a museum. So when I pick it up, if it goes off like somewhere and on the movie set, for anyone to ever assume that there would be live ammo on a movie set, I just don't understand why they're like, well, he should have checked. You have to understand it's a different world of it's like having a food taster. Like, when you order food, do you have someone taste it for you? No, because you're not the king who's trying to get assassinated. And it's just why does the king have a food taster and no one else does? There's a reason. So I just think for a normal schmuck like us to say, well, of course you never aim a gun. Of course we don't. But we don't have lightsabers. We don't have spaceships. We don't have time machines. And they do every day at work. Everything about his job is pretend. Why would he think a gun is real? Well, it was real. This is a good conversation for us because we do disagree. Like we do disagree. I know we do. You think lightsabers are real? Well,
So let's start here. Let's start with the things that you and I do agree with. I think one of the things that you and I do agree with, even though I disagree with most of what you just said, I don't think Alec Baldwin should necessarily go to jail. I think there's probably a penalty. I saw there's a fine involved. I do think there are things here. Based off of the situation, what I've read so far, I personally don't think he should end up behind bars, but I do think that there is a negligence and there is a responsibility to this. I get the aspect of a movie set and how it's different, and you are playing pretend, and there is make-believe aspects that you're not wrong. Like, someone like me would have a hard time relating to that if that was my everyday life, like playing pretend, right? I do think, though, that there are aspects of weapons and guns that just because you're on a movie set and just because you play pretend every day of your life, it does not excuse you from those things. One of the biggest disagreements, I think, within this case, I think you have people that are never around guns, right? It's just not part of their existence. And to be honest, like, I'm not somebody that's around them every day, but I grew up with them. I was around them enough. Like, I have enough resources in being around them, instances to fall back on, that I know that when you are handed a gun, rule number one is the gun is always loaded. Always. It's always loaded. There is no pretend when you're holding a gun. And one of the things that I said to you was, I get the pretend part of like lightsabers and everything else. I would imagine Alec Baldwin is smart enough to know that when something is in his hand, it looks or feels authentic enough to know, like, this isn't a fake gun necessarily. Now, do I think Alec Baldwin should have known whether or not the ammo was real, whether or not there was ammo in it? I think those are all fair questions. Like, I actually think that's middle ground where you and I would start to like agree on some of that stuff. Where I struggle is just the idea of Alec Baldwin holding a gun. by the way, off camera, like off scene, like the incident did not occur during filming.
Correct.
And for him to just point it at an individual and pull the trigger, it goes against anybody who's ever been trained or taught about guns. It goes against everything you've ever been trained or taught about guns, regardless of who you are, where you are, what's going on. Rule number one is the gun is always loaded. So I don't think Alec Baldwin should be in jail. I do think Alec Baldwin was negligent.
Well, listen, and I will agree with the fact that I don't know why you'd ever point it at someone and pull the trigger.
It doesn't make a ton of sense.
And I get that. But when you say rule number one is the gun is always loaded, I don't think it is on a movie set. On a farm in Blossburg, yes.
Okay.
Because why wouldn't, like, of course you should. But on a movie set, I don't know.
I know. But see, I think that's where you're, like, it's a little Fight Club-ish, like rule number one, you know. But, like, that is why rule number one exists. Like, this example of what happened is why that's rule number one. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are, what you're holding. Like, that is the rule because things like this happen if it's not.
I get it. And I think depending on the audience that you're talking to, if you are here in central Pennsylvania, north central Pennsylvania, where it is extremely rural and essentially everyone has been around guns. Like even people who don't own guns have fired guns, and we've been there. So to ask them, the answer is, well, of course, it's gun safety, and you never do that. I would love to ask every actor who's ever been on a cop series, who has held a gun, who has looked at a gun, because all these police, and how many of them were ever handed the gun and checked to see if it was loaded. And I would bet you that the answer is next to zero.
So I think I can agree with you, but also say to you, like, that doesn't make it right.
But you get
what I'm saying? Like,
but if they've been filming, I mean, back in the day, all they had was Westerns. And when they were probably firing real guns because they didn't blang, you know, and all that stuff. But Lone Ranger and TV shows and Starsky and Hutch and all the way up through all these crimes, CSIs and all these things.
Sure.
And how many thousands and thousands of gun scenes have there been? And how many actors have actually checked to see if it's, because when I'm handed, it's a prop. It is a prop.
But I think that's also part of what makes this debate possible, is that there are times throughout history where, like, people have died on movie sets because something went wrong with a sword, something went wrong with a gun, and they were filming, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, what happened?
Guy died in Ben-Hur.
Yes. What makes this different, though, is it wasn't within the scene or the acting, or there just wasn't a reason in anybody's world, on set, off set, Alec Baldwin, Joe, whoever, there was never a reason for the weapon to be pointed at an individual and for the trigger to be pulled.
I agree with that 100%.
Regardless of whether you checked it or you didn't check, or you know, or you're a professional or not a professional, there's just never. So even when I agree with that.
I agree with that 100%.
Even when I go back and I think about, like, instances where it has happened in the past, I think what allows this debate to happen is that reasoning. Like, there just wasn't a reason for him to.
And I get that, and I agree. It would be different if he, like, was pointing over here and was like, and it ricocheted, and I agree with you. I agree with you on that.
So I think that makes it a challenge. The other part that I didn't know, I just read about this morning. I should have kept the article up. He's a producer on the movie as well.
Correct.
So there is, I mean, obviously there's a whole irony, full circle to that, but there is this concept of, not only were you an actor, and, like, let's say as an actor, you could say, like, it's not my responsibility to know if the gun's loaded or not. I'm not a professional in arms, right? And like, even that, I'll listen to you. I don't know if I fully agree, because if you know you're doing a movie where you're going to hold a gun, guess what you should probably be doing? Should probably train yourself around being around guns. Is that a fair statement to make? It would be like if I was going to make a movie about pirates and I was going to hold a sword for half the movie and I just did no training in the world.
No, I get what you're saying.
So I think because he's a producer and he was an actor in it, I do think there is a negligence of kind of like, listen, dude, like, you knew you were making a Western. You were a producer on the movie. You knew You knew the budget. You knew how much there was to spend. I just can't imagine that there's any defense where Alec Baldwin could say, I was uncomfortable. I didn't know. Like, then don't make a Western. Like, you can't be a producer and an actor in a Western and then go like, well, firearms are unusual to me. And it's like, then familiarize yourself before you go. Like, you can't show up and act. I don't know. That part really irks me a little bit.
I see that point as well.
Okay.
I'm not saying there's no negligence, but I'm saying that through this, I can't think of a great example off the top of my head, but for people to just say, well, gun safety, and he should have checked. It is not, in his world, it is a toy. It is a prop. It is like they're handed Coke bottles that are empty.
Yeah.
They're handed food that doesn't eat. Like, and then they do it and they do it again. It is just not real. Nothing about this is real.
Yeah.
So for them to think that, like, and there's just no place where, I mean, it'd be like, well, there's a razor blade in a kindergarten classroom. Why the hell would there be a razor blade in a kindergarten classroom? Well, I don't know, but there is one. Well, why would there be live ammunition on a movie set? I don't know. And they still haven't found who brought the live ammunition and why it's there.
That's a whole other story.
But you would just assume, I mean, it was like we talked about, and this is maybe a bad example, and I'm sure it is, but that's all we do is give bad examples. When we talked about as coaches, with the whole incident with the locker room when the kids urinated on the floor, and we're like, as coaches, we often do a sweep through the locker room at the end to make sure a kid didn't leave anything. Here's a warm-up jersey. Here's a sneaker. Here's a wallet. Like, just make sure that we didn't leave anything behind. And never before did we check that we need to check the locker room to make sure nobody took a leak on the floor. Like, I don't think on any of these TV sets and movie sets and closed things where it's like, I don't think anyone thought, hey, we should check just to make sure no one brought live ammo.
Sure. I think that's one of the lines that, again, makes it. And I think the reason we disagree is that line where you go like, nothing's real on a movie set. But what's weird is, like, in my world, nothing's more real than a gun. Like, it's not. Like, there's nothing more real than somebody holding a gun. And I said to you before the show, it's this weird thing where, like, I could know a gun was complete. Like, you could have the chamber open, right? And even if someone, like, turned it and pointed at me, the first thing I would do is take my hand over. The first thing I would do is like, move my hand over, and I'd be like, hey, buddy, like, let's.
You would not say that politely.
No, I wouldn't. But you.
I'm with you. No, I do agree with that.
So it's this weird line where I do think you have people that are like, well, like, it doesn't make sense. It's all props. And prop is maybe a key word in this, right? Like, it'll be interesting as they move forward with this, the definition of a prop and what classifies a prop. And if something's authentic or listened as authentic, is it still viewed as a prop? Should it be like, I think there's a whole wording lingo around the word prop that's very fascinating with this case. Because to me, like, a gun is never a prop, ever. It's never a prop.
Because in your
a gun to me is always a gun.
Because in your world, it's never been a prop.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
So it's hard for me to relate to that argument of it.
Like I said, there are lots of people in their world, a lightsaber has never been a weapon, but in some people's world, it's the greatest weapon of all time.
That world's not real.
It just depends. Just because it's a galaxy far, far away doesn't mean it's not real.
It's not real. I do think there is an authenticity to the movie because it was supposed to be like the real deal. Like, this Western was not supposed to be this, like, phony, hokey pokey.
Right.
I mean, they were making a authentic Western. Right. And so he's a producer. I find it hard to believe that he doesn't know. Like, I think the point you're making is hard for me to attach to Alec Baldwin in this circumstance. So, like, you're a producer on an authentic Western and you are an actor in the movie. And the idea that you don't know you're holding an authentic weapon, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not. I use the example of the really bad space movie with the bugs.
And I can't think of what it's
Starship
called.
Troopers.
Oh, Starship Troopers.
I mean, a joke. Like, if you walk on the set of Starship Troopers and someone hands you, like, a space gun, I get it. Like, this is a prop. Like, you're a producer in an authentic Western and someone hands you a gun. I just can't imagine that you think it's a prop. It's not.
No, and I'm on both sides of this. Because of the setting that it's in, it is a prop. When you have a gun in a museum, it's an ornament. It's not a gun anymore because there's no bullets in it. So therefore, it's it is a gun, but it's not a gun.
Sure.
There's not. But I also agree that there should be a level of respect that when you're holding a real weapon, that there should be a respect level to it. And yes, if we went over to the Tabor Museum and there was a gun from Billy the Kid, and I wouldn't pick it up and point it at you.
Sure.
Just because, even though why would there ever be live ammo in it? But there is something about it. So I do agree with that point.
Yeah. Do you think, because this is, as this moves forward, do you think I think Alec Baldwin knew it was a real gun. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm trying to find not middle ground, but I'm just curious, like, where we fall as far as the gun. I think Alec Baldwin didn't know whether or not it was loaded. Do you agree with that? Like, I don't think Alec Baldwin knew the gun.
Oh, I think he would have.
Had no
I
idea.
think he would have bet his life that it wasn't.
It wasn't.
I think he would have pointed it himself. He was
Okay.
that sure it was unloaded.
All the reports so far have shown that Alec Baldwin didn't check.
Correct.
I would make the argument that Alec Baldwin, you're a producer, you're an actor, you're an authentic Western. I would imagine at this point, if you don't know how to open up the chamber and check, you're negligent.
Right.
Okay. So I think there's a middle ground there where we might not agree 100%, but we're moving closer into the realm of like where we would agree. So again, like I said, I think he was negligent. I think manslaughter is a fair charge. I will go back and say again, I don't think he should be in jail. I don't think the intent and purpose behind it was enough to actually send somebody to jail. But I certainly do think there's a negligence. I think there's a fine. I do think there's a penalty there somewhere, without a doubt.
And I do think that there's a social element to this. There's
there's
an anger at Alec Baldwin because
he
he was the one who played Trump on Saturday Night Live, and there is a section of society that hates Alec Baldwin because he made fun of Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. And there is a section of society that you can't make fun of Donald Trump. And those people, if he would have been any other actor.
Mm-hmm. I think the point you're making is true in the sense that I think there are people that are really enjoying this right now.
Correct.
I don't know if I would take it any further than that. I don't know if it means, I don't think this is happening because of those people or because he played Donald Trump on SNL. But I do think
it might not be.
I think there's a whole faction of the country right now, though, that certainly are getting their jollies off on the idea that he's in legal.
And I think yes, I agree with that.
Yeah. So really, really interesting. And it's only gonna get more interesting as it moves forward. I think there's a whole conversation about the lingo of prop, like defining a prop on a movie set. I think there's a whole fascination here for producing movies, because I think producers have this weird thing of like where you're funding it, but a lot of the liability is only financially, right?
Right.
But what happens when you're a producer, but you're involved in the day-to-day and the liability of that? Because we see that happening more and more. More and more actors, once they make their money, they dive into producing so they can make the things they want to make. Does that shift what actors are willing to do from a producing standpoint? I think the fact that he's a producer is not going to help him. I think it's
not at all.
I think it's going to hurt him a lot. In this
I think so too. And I think too, there's a level of precedent setting that's just of the things like, it's a gun. You have to be responsible.
Sure.
And to all the other people, because there will still be CSIs and I was going to say NYPD Blue. What's the one with Tom Selleck now?
There's like Chicago PD.
I know Magnum PI. They're all over. So for all these, like going forward, like, hey, you have to be responsible. Yeah. And I think there is a level of not making an example out of Baldwin, but because he's such a big name, and because that there is this aspect of, hey, you're still responsible, and you just can't say whoops.
They had I tried to pull it up while you were talking. A conviction would be punishable by 18 months in jail and up to a $5,000 fine, according to prosecutors. So that is right now appears to be like the maximum punishment that they could receive.
Right. So anyway, it will be interesting going forward.
And we didn't even mention the entire investigation beyond Baldwin and the armor of like, where did the live ammunition come from?
Right.
Why was it there? I mean, there's a whole other investigation on this that is wild to me.
And this is the thing. They're never going to find out unless someone takes the fall.
Sure.
They can't find out who leaked the Supreme Court thing, and there was only 9 of them.
Sure.
Like, so.
No, I'm with you. We should do this real quick. Facebook user. I always assumed it was during a take. That definitely changes things in my mind. I still feel whoever is in charge of props is most liable. How would that gun ever be able to fire off live ammo? That's a fair point. I guess it's fair to ask, if you had to choose Armor or Baldwin, which one would you have it fall onto? I think I still see. I think I'm still. Maybe it's the conservative part of me, but in my mind, it's still Baldwin holding it and acting negligent. Like, I think I would hold Baldwin responsible before the Armor. But I think, but what's
No, I
funny
get
is
what you're saying.
I think I'm in the minority there. I think most would blame the Armor.
Yeah, I would think so, because they're the person who handed it to them, and just assumed that it's like their job to take care of it.
Yeah.
But it also goes to the next level of like this realism and the art and the whatever. Can't you people now like use a gun that doesn't fire? That it looks good, but it doesn't. It's not good. It doesn't work.
I agree with you. Ryan, when someone hands you a gun, you rack it to check. You have no business touching it without knowing safety of the firearm. The interesting thing is we're going to find out how much training there was before going on the set. Like, was there a budget spent on training people in firearm protocol? Like, all those things. I'm assuming there were things done. I'm curious to see how much. Like, did they just meet up one Saturday afternoon and shoot at a couple of targets? Or was there actually, like, legitimate training on, like, see, I think that's another.
It would not. There could have been. I mean, it could run the spectrum.
Yeah.
There could have been none.
I don't disagree.
I would not be shocked at all if there was none.
None. Bradley, good point. Anytime someone says good point, we're going to share it. Good point.
We don't.
We're always going to. Thank you, Brad. We agree. We agree there were some good points. And then we're going to go, Heather, the prop person should have confirmed it was empty before ever handing it off. I do agree with that. I think it's not a great debate, but I think the debate is it the Armor for handing off a loaded gun, or is it Baldwin for pointing the gun when he shouldn't? Is it equal? Are there one more than the other? I find Baldwin's worse because he could have fixed the mistake of the person who handed off the gun.
No, I agree, but I see like trainers handing water bottles, and so someone somewhere, dumped vodka into a kid's water bottle. Yeah. So is the trainer supposed to taste it all? Is the trainer supposed to, like, how you just, when you're on a bench in a game and trainer hands you a water bottle, you assume it's fine. So if there's something wrong with, is it the head coach's fault because the head coach is in charge of everything? Is it the principal's fault? Because, like,
it's so funny. Like, but here's this again. I've really enjoyed this conversation because I'm getting to see a different side that, like, I just never. You keep using these examples, and every time, like, I hear the item, and to me, like, when, like, gun is just, like, to me, a gun is just, it's,
and that's fair.
It's like
that is fair.
Everything else is over here, and a gun is just, it's just like, it's no matter what you can be on Mars, a gun is a gun. You know what? Like, it is. So it's interesting to hear you give these examples.
No, and I do get your point. I don't disagree with that.
Because the analogies you make, I'm like, the analogy makes sense.
But
then the moment I put a gun into the scenario, I'm like, it no longer makes sense.
No, I get you. And that is, yes, you're like, it's a good point, but, there's a difference between a water bottle and a peanut butter sandwich and a gun. And I'm with you. No, I get it.
It's interesting. Football playoffs. You're excited. America's team is still rolling. If you had, who's going to ruin this for you? How is this going to get ruined?
What's really
as
fun
a Cowboys fan, if you had to guess how this gets ruined
for
you.
Let me tell you, as a Cowboy fan, I don't know if you saw our numbers on turf, or we play on turf in Dallas, and we had 5 games on the road on grass this year, and our numbers were abysmal.
Okay.
And
San Francisco's grass.
Dak has not been good. So going into Tampa, I was like, Dak has sucked. We're on grass. We're playing Brady. The
Bucs were so bad.
I know, and that was the saving grace. That the Bucs aren't a great team. So, correct. And Dallas played well. So now it's almost like I'm on borrowed time. Like, everything from here is gravy.
No, I feel like you're 180ing. I feel like you're trying to.
No, I'm just so excited I get to see him play again. And like this weekend, I've already told people I might just sit on the couch for all weekend and just watch football and gain 40 pounds. Chris Massey, who's a good friend of mine, is a diehard Niner fan.
Yes.
He's worried about their rookie quarterback has been nothing but great, and he's like, sooner or later the bubble's going to burst.
But this
And
is
I was like,
working.
yeah, I don't.
But this
So
is working out well for you because Purdy's playing well for San Francisco. But this is, you're playing a 7th-round draft pick. Like this is kind of
we got a shot.
Yeah, no,
We got a shot.
This falling.
So
well for
it
you.
is. It's going to be fun. There's a lot. I'm watching an Eagles-Giants game, and I'm not going to want to gouge my eyes out because as a Cowboy fan, I hate them both, with equal hatred. But I'll be rooting for the Giants so hard because they could get us a home game, and it is. I'm excited because of the way of just the timing of my life and my schedule that it all works out.
Yes.
And that the Cowboys are playing, and we're last. So it's like the build up. It's going to be a late. I may be unrecognizable by next week because I may have just.
Can we bring up the Stetson Bennett thing because I want to? It has to do with the NFL playoffs, and there was a stat which I'm sure you or Jimmy found as you were looking around. Stetson Bennett was the starting quarterback for the Georgia Bulldogs, who won the national championship, and I had told you that he was 25 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Which you at the time you didn't know, or you did know. You knew he was older, but you didn't know he was 25, something along that line.
I think I told you were full of.
Yes.
It.
He was 25. There is a graphic going around right now. At the beginning of the NFL playoffs, I believe there were 6 NFL quarterbacks in the playoffs younger than Stetson Bennett. Some people have been like, that's a joke, like Stetson Bennett should be embarrassed. Like there's all these like, how you doing, fellow kids memes of Stetson Bennett like walking into like the colleges and stuff like that. Do you find it unfair is a corny word? Like if you're Stetson Bennett, are you proud? Does it diminish it? Like how do you feel if you're Stetson Bennett?
Hey, that's a good question.
You're 25 years old and listen, I don't care if you're 30. Winning a national championship is hard. It's not easy. And so there's this balance of kind of like you've spent your whole life playing the sport and you reach the pinnacle of college football and you win back-to-back national titles. But then you're 25 and you look around and everyone's kind of like, well, you're beating up on a bunch of 20-year-olds and everyone that year is better than you is playing in the NFL playoffs this weekend. And I don't know how I would balance that if I were Stetson Bennett.
I mean, there's value to both sides of it. The first time I ever remember it was there was a guard. I think he was at North Carolina. I can't remember who it was, but he was a freshman, and he's a freshman, and everyone's like, "Oh, look at this freshman," and he's taking over. And one of my buddies is like, "He's 20."
Yeah.
And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, he took a year off, and then he did this, and then he did."
By the way, full disclosure, I was 22. I turned 23 the spring that I finished.
I was the same.
Okay.
Ish.
And I was playing a college sport that spring. So I was 22 turning 23 my last.
My last college, my birthday's in November, and my last college football season, I turned 20 because I did 4.5 years of college. I graduated college in the spring when I was 22, and I went back to school in the fall when I was 22. I turned 23, like right at the end of college.
So full disclosure from both of us is like, we're not sitting here implying like you got to be 21 to play college sports.
Right.
Like, there's people all across the country between the ages of 17 all the way up to 29, 30 that are playing Division II, Division I sports.
Right.
So this is not necessarily
but it is for society when we want to compare, it just makes it easy, especially in sports. We compare apples and apples. That's why if you're at the Little League field and this kid's 12 and this kid's 14, you're like, well, no wonder he's kicking. This kid's in 8th grade, this kid's in 6th grade. But then we see it in public school too. Like, well, this kid's a senior, and this kid's a senior, but this kid's 19 months older than that senior, and it changes things. So, yeah, you just have this. Oh, he's like in college, it just seems like, and the red shirt was the big thing for all these years before COVID and all that.
Sure.
But it was just like, oh, there, yay. Oh, he's a red shirt. He's a 5th-year senior. It's like a bonus. But yes, it is incredibly different. Not just with physicality, but with intelligence and emotional. He's 25 years old and he's throwing against a 19-year-old defensive back. In college, it matters. Once you get to the pro ranks where there's nothing better, when you're a 23-year-old versus a 33-year-old, it is what it is.
Well, there's two things I want to touch there. The interesting thing is like in college football, there's this weird thing where it's an advantage to play a 19-year-old, but then you get to a certain level where playing a 19-year-old means you're probably playing one of the best in the country. So like in a normal college football game, to play a 19-year-old as a 25-year-old is an advantage. Like you're bigger, stronger, faster, all those things. But like in the SEC or in the national championship, if there's a 19-year-old on the field, they're probably going to be making $10 million in like 2 years.
Maybe, unless they're a backup and people were hurt. But yeah.
So like there's this weird balance of like, in order to play the best, sometimes you have to play the 19-year-old. Like there's a reason the 19-year-old is on the field. The other point that you brought up and I want to make is, I think for Stetson Bennett, it's this weird bell curve of like, I think during it, you're just in it. And you're having the time of your life. And it doesn't matter if you could be 15 or 35. It doesn't matter. Look at what we're doing. This is amazing. And then I think there's going to be this period of time right now. Like, I think he's entering this period of time where like, maybe he doesn't make an NFL roster. And now he's kind of looking around and he's like, I'm 26, I'm 27. Like, I couldn't compete with my peers when I went on this level. Like, what's going on? But I think what will happen is over time that will fade. And he'll just have the memories of how awesome it was to win.
Well, and he certainly made what, maybe it's not in the NFL. See, I think he'll get a backup job. Like, why wouldn't he? But
because he's 25.
But who cares? Backups he's got 10 years. And he's not a young, dumb kid. He's not. But like I was going to say this.
Roster, there's 4 at most. 4 times. You're talking about 130 people on the planet. Do you
there's
think
some bad backup quarterbacks.
Do you think Stetson Bennett is one of the best 130 people on the planet playing quarterback? Okay, then there you go. So then you think he should make.
And this is also this is more of a testament of life to get philosophical. That like how much do you let other people affect the path that you've taken? Mm-hmm. I played college football. 2 guys were much older. One had gone to the Army out of high school.
Sure.
And I don't remember if John did 2 years in the Army or 4 years in the Army. But when he was finishing, like when he was a senior playing college football, he was at least like 24, 25, playing college football at Susquehanna because he had enlisted first and then came out to play. Right. So yes, he was lining up as a defensive lineman playing against, but he played hard. He had fun. Like you would never know a point if you just watched him play. Right. You're like, this guy feels like it's, he's out there playing football. And we had another kid who had gone Division I and it didn't work out. And he actually took a couple years off from school and then decided to go back and use his other, and he was kind of in the same boat. So if it's just like everything, if you're okay with it, then who cares what they think?
You know who doesn't care that he was 25?
Stetson Bennett.
Georgia Bulldogs.
Oh, that's true.
Georgia Bulldogs do not care.
No.
There's not one person in the state of Georgia that cares Stetson Bennett.
And they're like, listen, we don't make the rules. They don't, it would be the kid at Penn State. Why can't I think of the quarterback's name at Penn State?
Sean Clifford.
Clifford is in the same, because I know he took a lot of stuff because he'd been in college forever.
According to Tastes Like Good, Stetson Bennett and Sean Clifford both get AARP letters.
Exactly.
So there you go.
But it's your experience, and
I agree from an interpersonal standpoint. I totally agree with you, but I do think he's going to go through that curve. I think at some point it will hit him like, kind of like, was it fair? Did I like it? And then it won't matter. Like then it'll go off a cliff and it'll be like, it didn't matter.
Well, for older sports fans, like Chris Weinke was one of them.
I remember Chris.
He signed out of college or out of high school to play baseball.
Yeah.
And he went and spent like 4 or 5 years in the minors and couldn't make it.
He was 27.
I think he was 26 when he won the Heisman.
Okay.
And then he got drafted and then he wasn't good enough to play in the NFL.
Right.
But see, that's a lot. There's lots of good. I mean, when you think of the Gino Torettas, the Danny Werfels, there's lots of big time 21, 22, 23-year-old college quarterbacks who can't make it.
Sure.
So to think that Stetson Bennett at 20, I think Stetson Bennett's going to be in the league for 10 years. I really do.
Wow.
Now he might not start.
No, I get that. I don't think his age takes away from how good he looked. They were play passes he made that just looked like an NFL QB. His path was just different. There you go.
I agree.
I think you get older, that gap gets smaller. 16-year-old versus 12-year-old is bad. A 25-year-old versus 19-year-old doesn't have the same feel to me at all. That's
I disagree. Because a 19, just from also the mental aspect, imagine how smart with the offense and reading defenses, and he's just so much more intellectually advanced about the X's and O's of what's going on around him than a 19-year-old.
Sure.
A 19-year-old just hasn't had the time.
I had, not to keep making about you and I had just turned 18 when I showed up to campus. And I can tell you, like, I was a lost puppy. I mean, I had no idea what a college practice looked like.
It took you 4 years to find the library.
I mean, it did take me 4 years to find.
Did you go? I always meant to ask you this, so I'll ask you live. Where did you go first?
I went to Penn
Erie.
State Barron first.
What's it called, Barron?
It's called Penn State Barron.
Did you go to the library there?
Yes.
Okay.
But I had to. They were much more stringent academically as far as like showing up to stuff and doing things.
So it was just LHU that you didn't really even try.
Once I'd gotten to LHU, I mean, it's Division II. There's scholarship athletes. Like, it's just a different vibe. Division II, I think one of the things that people don't realize is Division III. You can still it's not high school from a talent standpoint. It's high school from the sense of like it's still very regimented. Like, you can still it's more bossy. Like, you can still kind of tell kids like, this is what we're doing and here's the thing and da-da-da. Division II, because you have like scholarship athletes, it's much more catered towards the player.
Well, I will say this:
to be a Division II coach versus Division III coach, you have to be much more of a people's person. Like, you have to be okay with kind of like kids. And the other thing too, like
doing stupid stuff.
Not doing stupid stuff, but like kids are calling the shots is wrong. But you have to give more rope because of the scholarship kind of like higher level aspect.
No, I get what you mean.
Than in Division.
Well, I was from a guy who played Division III. It is very much like high school.
Yes.
I've always said
it's like, very regimented.
It is a high school all-star game is what Division III sports are.
Sure.
And then you get to the other levels and it's elite. But it is, yes.
And so at that, for me, Division III, like this regimented, I really struggled with it. Like, I really struggled with just kind of like doing everything and everybody else.
Because you need to be pampered and catered to.
Time is just a construct, my man. Like, I don't know what to tell you.
No, that's not it.
Like,
you need to be pampered and catered to like the big timer that you are.
No, like my thing was like, you would show up. You could show up 5 minutes late to something, but then you would outwork 10 people. And all that mattered is you showed up 5 minutes late.
Yeah, because most people in society are like, just get there on time.
And you just can't, I understand that. But my point being is like, for me, the point was kind of like, hey, like, no one's doing what they're supposed to do out here. And you're worried about the fact that Timmy was 5 minutes late. Like,
yes, why can't Timmy get here?
Like, let's talk about, no, it's the opposite. Like, for me, it's like, let's do this. Like, here's the thing. Like, did that dude just run as hard as he could in the sprint? Because if not, I don't care about that dude being 5 minutes late.
I do though, because if everyone else can show up on time, then you show up on time too.
No, see,
were you ever 5 minutes late for a game?
5 minutes late for a game?
Like, here's the ball. We're tipping off.
We're talking about practice.
Not a game. Not a game. Practice. So you're throwing the ball up, and the guy's like, "Oh, I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet."
So what I'm saying is, what you're describing works very well in Division III.
It works very well everywhere. You have a game time.
If you take that mindset to Division II, at different places you will struggle because it's just you're not dealing with the same type of athlete. You're not dealing with the same type of kid. It's just different. I don't know how else to describe it.
So you're telling me at Penn State wrestling practice, they just roll in whenever they want?
That's not what I'm saying to you at all. What I'm saying to you is like there's a certain like Division I, there's TV contracts and there's things like there's real weight at Division I. Okay. So it is much more like regimented and like everything's and financially they can do a lot of things. What I'm saying to you is below that level, like Division II and Division III are much, in my opinion, Division II and Division III have more in common off of the fields and the courts than Division II and Division I have. Division II and Division I have more in common on the field and the courts. So what I'm saying is like if you're a Division III coach, you can kind of be like a drill sergeant of like we're all doing this and no one's bigger than the other. And Division II, like there's scholarship money. And so like you can't tell me so-and-so's not more important. I know so-and-so's more important because I get a semester bill and it has X and he gets a semester bill and crumples it up. So like you can't tell me there's not a difference.
And I get that. Okay. I do get that. But there's still the element of just like no matter who you are, you showing up on time in that art.
We're having two different arguments.
No,
I'm not talking about the difficulties of showing up on time. I'm arguing about like what you worry about as a coach at those two different.
No, I do get that. Yeah. I'm with you. I'm with you.
That's all. Practice like you play. Brad says Brad's on fire today. I don't know what to say. That's a good point, Mark. I didn't think about the mental side. We're always going to share a comment when someone says that's a good point. Always going.
What was the mental side? What did I say?
I don't remember.
What mental part was I?
I zoned out after you brought up.
When
Penn
I
State
start
wrestling.
speaking, you
When
don't
you
listen.
compared Penn State wrestling to Susquehanna football, I zoned
No,
out.
I never did that. But you were just like, oh, with big time athletes, they can show up 5 minutes late. No one cares. And I'm like, I think people care.
I think people care. It's how you handle it.
I don't think it's that hard to get.
I think a coach can go back in the office and be like, oh my God, he can't show up on time. But like in the moment, in practice, in front of everybody, he's going to handle it very different, especially at the Division II level.
All I know is when Alec Baldwin accidentally shoots you and you're bleeding out and the paramedics show up 5 minutes late, you're going to be a little upset.
Well, yes, they're a paramedic, not a 19-year-old
kid.
kid.
Just go now. We'll go in 5 minutes.
Not a 19.
We'll go in 5 minutes. He's bleeding. It feels fine. Whatever. 5 minutes. What's it matter if we're 5 minutes late? Once we get there, we'll just work harder.
We're just going to call the show "Worst Analogies Ever." That's what we're going to start calling the show. The other thing I want to talk to you about, these guys are producers that I told you about.
Here's my fear.
We do have midday show producers.
Before we go any further, what happens if they unionize? Are we doomed?
Say that again.
If our producers unionize,
yes,
are we
doomed?
Are we doomed?
We're not quite there yet. It could be if they start really hitting.
I'm concerned when they start making demands, and
we're not there yet. If they're listening, if they want to comment on this, they wanted us to talk about, to end the show for 5 minutes, seasonal food, but it's deeper than that. They want us to talk about eating seasonal foods out of seasons. So, for example, Mark, do you eat ice cream in the winter?
Of course. I try not to because I'm trying to eat less crap. But yes, okay. Everyone eats ice cream in the winter. If you don't eat ice cream in the winter, is life worth living?
See, I notice I don't eat ice cream in the winter.
Ever.
Naturally. I have not had ice cream since October. It's been a while.
Oh my gosh. No,
it's been a while.
You're sad.
So it's interesting.
So there are some like pumpkin pie.
So it's so funny. Do you have pumpkin pie on the 4th of July?
Is it available?
Well, that's the thing. Like, but if it was available, though, see, I think.
Oh yeah, I would eat pumpkin pie anything. It's delicious.
You would eat pumpkin pie all throughout the year.
Oh my gosh, it's delicious. The first one that came to my mind was eggnog because it is so seasonal. I don't know if I would drink eggnog anytime.
Well, eggnog in the summer sounds awful.
It does.
Okay. Is there anything you wouldn't eat at a certain?
I'm trying. I
certain
can't think
time?
of it. If it's good, it's good. Like what wouldn't you eat that's seasonal?
Interesting. See,
like I know there's things like sand tarts are such a Christmassy thing, but I would never turn down a sand tart in May. They're delicious.
What about so instead of seasonal, what about like locational? Like, for example, I'm really bad about this. I never eat popcorn unless I'm like at the movie theater.
Oh my God, I make popcorn like 5 nights a week.
See, I never think to make it.
Oh my gosh. And I started making it because as I got older, it's like, this is something I can snack on. I can feel like, and there's just not much to it. Like I get plain popcorn. I don't put any butter on it. It's just, so it's like eating air.
Eating air. Ice cream in the winter, yes. Italian ice in the winter, absolutely
I don't
not.
eat Italian ice very much. I haven't had Italian ice in years.
Really?
Years.
It's really, really good though. What about this? Chili in the summer. Do you ever have chili in the summer?
Of course, I would have chili in the summer.
I've noticed I do it with soups. I've noticed in the summertime I don't really eat soup. In the wintertime, I have soup all the time.
I only eat soup when I'm sick.
A nice bisque in the wintertime.
A bisque.
That's where it's at. I just had bisque yesterday. You don't have bisque?
I do not have bisque. I do not. No, I do.
I literally just had bisque yesterday.
I will eat like a bowl of soup when I'm healthy, like twice a year.
Pumpkin spice lattes. Anything. First of all, I'm out on pumpkin in general. Don't try to give anything pumpkin around me in October, November. Or I'm sorry, outside of October, November. Pumpkin has like a 2.5 month.
Does pumpkin even exist outside of October, November?
I don't know.
I don't think you can get a pumpkin.
Do you like
spice.
Pumpkin? You like pumpkin?
Oh, it's delicious.
Oh, see, I don't like pumpkin.
I don't get you.
It's very like bland isn't the word. It's just not like, it's like having something that's sweet but not sweet enough. It's weird. I don't like it.
It's sweet but not sweet enough.
It'd be like you want to have something sweet and then you go to get a piece of pumpkin pie and I'm like, no, if you're gonna have something sweet, like go get something sweet.
I think it's delicious. I think pumpkin pie is delicious.
I can't do it. Jimmy, I guess Jeff hates my comments. I don't at all. I'm looking for a good one. This is your last one. You said Mark is
No, wait, hold
this
on.
was his
He
last
doesn't.
one.
He doesn't hate your comments. They're just all stupid.
No, he said Mark is a smart man, and I don't know. I just
That was the only. That's the best one you could come up with.
I didn't think it was worth it at the time. Here's another good one. Sunflower seeds aren't as popular in the winter. I have sunflower seeds in my car, so that's cheating. I have sunflower seeds all 12 months.
I would say that would be my guess. Because it's just not as practical because you spit them on the ground.
Yes.
And you're not outside as much to spit them on the ground.
Correct.
So I would think that's more of a logistical cleanup issue than it is the actual sunflower seed itself. But I agree with that.
For me, they are the perfect car. They stop me from going through a drive-through. I keep a pouch of sunflower seeds in my car, and anytime I get the urge, like I drive by somewhere, I get the urge, handful of sunflower seeds. I keep the water bottle right there, and I'm sure it has saved me a ton of calories over the years.
Now I will say this: the ice cream consumption is not even close between summer and winter, because in the winter when it's 32 degrees, you're like, hey, it'd be good right now. But yeah, I eat ice cream in the winter.
My family only makes pot roast in the fall or winter.
Well, I think cooking in general, because the hot and you're not around, like you're just on the go so much and you're outside more, and so I think anything that involves the oven, that's like the real oven, not the microwave oven, I think is way higher in the winter.
That's also, Jimmy, that's not fair, because I did share the Go Birds earlier when you were talking about the Cowboys.
I have never rooted for the Giants as hard as I will be rooting for the Giants Saturday night.
And Saquon Barkley, that helps.
Well, they win. Dallas has a chance at a home game.
Penn State grad, that helps. Anything, we have like 5 minutes before we got to go. Anything that you want to throw out there?
I heard just a reminder about the CTL in the evening with the Star.
Yep.
And to go on the website, you can still get tickets for that. Robbie Gould is about to move up the list of something playoff something. He's either in points, games played, or something as he kicks for the Niners. I'm hoping he doesn't score any points, but I'm guessing he will. And but he is something about like fourth all time in playoff points. Some ridiculous number that the local kid has done all right for himself. I say kid, he's probably 40 now.
He's getting up there now.
But he's done okay.
It's just not to compare the two, but it is like your brother in a sense of like, it is fascinating where you think of where they came from, what they got to do, what they got to see. And yes, fascinating.
It is weird. There was always those moments of being so close to it that you're just like, oh, yeah, what's his job? Yeah, he's just going to go out on Sunday night and kick in the playoffs. And yeah, it's what he does. He just kicks.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, what are you going to do? Well, if they win, he goes to the NFC Championship game and he kicks again.
Right.
And it is that aspect of, because when they're around, you're just like, what are you doing for lunch? And do you want this? And what do you want to order? And I'll go pick this up and you go pick this up. And now go do your job on national TV while everyone else is watching.
Sure.
And it was all I knew, but there were moments where you're like, wow, this is odd.
Yeah. I believe that.
And just that, oh, yeah, he's from Lock Haven.
Yeah.
You're right over there. He grew up over there. He went to Penn State. And then he went to Penn State, so that's obviously big time.
Sure.
But no, yeah, he's from Lock Haven. He just kicks. He makes them all.
He makes them all.
That's all. That's why he's still kicking, because he just makes them all.
When I was in college was, I believe, the Chicago Bears Super Bowl.
Okay.
And I was at Lock Haven when that was happening. So that was pretty neat. Town was
and that
excited.
The Purdy story is fun. The Robbie goal. I have told Chris Massey that if whoever wins Sunday night is who I'm rooting for to go to the Super Bowl, because I'm not rooting for the Eagles and I'm not rooting for the Giants.
I get worried about Chris now, because I'm not saying he's losing it. I'm not saying that, Chris. I'm not saying you're losing it. But vocally, he is, when the 49ers play, I'm constraints is what comes to mind. I get worried that he needs to be under control.
He's not a fan of the coach. I don't know if his tweets have given that away. And he's the most negative Nelly until they win.
You know what was wild was this, I don't know if it came up on your feed at all. The Steelers kept their offensive coordinator.
Okay.
I have never seen people know more about offensive coordinating than Pittsburgh Steelers fans after they decided to keep this guy.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, you would think they would win a Super Bowl if they got rid of this guy. That's basically the sentiment.
Yep, the Ravens were the same way. The Ravens just fired their offensive coordinator, and oh yeah, people are geniuses. They all know everything.
That's why you and I do this every day,
because we are
every single day. Thank you guys for watching the Midday Show. Be sure to go to NorthcentralPa.com for all of your local news.
Enjoy the Cowboy win.
We'll be back Monday to talk about this. Monday will either be you're going to be off the wall, I'm not going to be able to control you, or it's going to be somber and you're just going to want the show to be over in 15 minutes.
Yeah, I think I'll be
gonna be
fine.
no
It's
middle
just
ground.
another step along the way to our championship. I think I'll be fine.
I'm Jeff Everett. He is Mark Messina. We will see you on Monday.